Hi, this is Nicklin. Welcome to Humpback Chronicles. It's always fun to see how excited people get when whales show their tails. And I think it's pretty well known that whales can be identified by the markings on their tail. Like a fingerprint, we can tell one whale from another. And it's not just humpback whale tails. Almost every whale, dolphin, and porpoise study I've worked on has taken ID pictures of the animals. The tail, the dorsal fin, colors on the back, something so the animals can be matched with other pictures. On the research boat, the beginning of any interaction with whales starts with getting IDs, trying to get matching pictures, and we've been doing this because of the work with Jim Darling for over 40 years. These pictures are an integral part of our research. One of the things it does is keeps us from counting the same whale twice. And just recently, we've let go ID pictures from Hawaii on Happy Whale that shows more than 1,991 individual IDs. These are just from the last 20 years, and there's lots more to come. One thing this year, there were two whales that are very common where I live in Southeast Alaska, Sasha and Flame, that were seen with calves in Hawaii and have since been matched with calves back here in Alaska. To be able to go and say both of these animals are hanging out summer and winter close to where I live and work is something I don't think we would have dreamed of just a few years ago. Here are a couple of clips from documentaries on humpback whales of 1977 and 1978.
Every year around Christmas time, something wonderful happens in the waters off Hawaii. The whales come back. But today, their numbers have grown so small that the entire species has had to be protected by international law. Where do they come from? What brings them here? And what is the
secret world of the great whales?
There's 5 whales there, so we got a lot more coming up.
It has been estimated that 250 to 500 humpbacks winter in Hawaiian waters. They begin to arrive in November and depart in spring. No one knows exactly where these whales spend the rest of the year. Eventually, identification of individual whales seen here and in northern waters may settle this perplexing question.
The fact that we can use individual IDs, not just to count whales, but also to document their travel, got a giant boost forward in 1979, and it was a story that happened in Juneau, Alaska, right where I live.
This was a long time ago. I was a grad student, late 70s, working for Roger Payne in Maui. Most of the work was about song and singers, but I'd been photo IDing whales for a few years and had a couple hundred different animals. And the whole ID thing was still sort of new. Folks on the East Coast had been doing it for a few years, and I learned from Roger that a fellow named Chuck Jurasz had been taking ID pictures since the late 60s in Southeast Alaska. I was really just doing what I was told. Roger said I should go to Alaska and compare ID pics with the Jurazes, and first thought was that sounded great. The second thought was, why? We knew Hawaii whales did not go to Alaska. All the earlier literature said that humpback whales migrated pretty much directly north-south, and anybody who looked at a map could see that Southeast Alaska was not north of Hawaii. And on top of that, there had been a paper that was published right around that time which said pretty much unequivocally that Hawaii whales did not go to Alaska. And that was at a time when I still believed what was written in science papers. We did not know where Hawaii whales came from, and we didn't know where they went, but we were pretty sure it wasn't Alaska. But following orders, I collected my binder of black and white prints of IDs and headed for Alaska. I remember leaving Maui in May and actually seeing a cow-calf off Olowolo on the way to the airport. And of course, flew through Seattle to Juneau and was picked up at the airport there. And I think within the first few minutes of that, I learned that there were humpback whales somewhere nearby and thought it was pretty neat there in both locations at the same time. I did not know the Jarrahs at all. They lived on a boat, and so I'd rented a room in a local hotel where we could set up and compare pictures. Chuck taught at the high school, so it was left up to wife Ginny and I to do the comparisons. It seemed that we were really, just going through the motions here. No one thought that the two locations were connected by whales. And even though our ID collections were probably relatively large for the time, they were still very small, compared to the population size overall. So the odds it just didn't seem there were any odds at all that we were going to find a match.
Sitting in the restaurant above the harbor in Juneau, Alaska, with a fellow whale researcher from Hawaii, I was fortunate to experience a eureka moment that made us look at the world differently. I am Ginny Jurasz. My husband and I and our 2 children were spending hours on the water in southeast Alaska observing humpback whales. Summers were packed with graduate students and other researchers, photographers, and friends, all aboard our 50-foot vessel, the Ginger. The early years studying humpback whales were filled with wonder. We rarely saw other boats, and our vessel was low and slow. Our studies began each day with the first blow, and we would spend the entire day motoring so slowly beside our subject that some days we just turned off the engine and drifted. My daughter Susan keeping a breath log, while son Peter was still very young, but he took up the camera. Both sequences frequently ended with a deep dive and the show of a tail. It became apparent that each whale's tail presented a different pattern, and soon we were naming them to help us distinguish them apart. Names initially were inspired by the patterns we saw on the tail, such as dot, snow, star, or Frenchie, named for 2 white streaks near the center of the tail that looked like a mustache. And as we became more familiar with the population, our names began to reflect relationships. There was Gertrude and Garf, a female and calf. And then we saw a third whale join them. Not wanting to be presumptuous to assume it was the father, we called the third whale Garf Uncle, which delighted the music fans on our team, and it soon became Garf's Uncle. Several summers into our work, Roger Payne, a whale researcher from the East Coast, was recording humpback whales in Hawaii, came aboard the Ginger to record. He was working with another researcher, Jim Darling, who was recording the population in Hawaii using photos of the patterns on the flukes. Roger encouraged Jim to meet with us in Juneau to see if we could find a match between the southeast Alaska and Hawaii populations. This made good sense to us. In Alaska, we were seeing mothers and calves, but we're not seeing mating whales or newborns. While some of the whales stayed the winter around Juneau, many of them leave and return in the summer. But where do they go? Jim and I sat at the Breakwater Inn looking at slides and photos.
Their IDs were in color slides, so we set up a slide projector and shone the IDs on the hotel room wall, and I'd set out the binder of prints on the bed, and the way it went was sort of click and ID up on the wall, and on the third whale we put on the wall, we looked at the binder and looked closer at both and pulled the print out of the binder and held it up to the wall and looked at each other, and there was absolutely no question it was a match. And as it turned out, it was a total of 7 we found that day. So humpback whales in Alaska in the summer, same whales in Maui in the winter. It was nothing less than stunning. All at once, we had to forget what we thought we knew and start all over again. I hadn't read the paper that came out of this for a long time, decades, and it was interesting to see the points we were making. We definitely emphasized that Whales did not have to travel directly north-south during migrations, and in this case, actually traveled northeast-southwest, and I guess at the time that was a revelation. Another interesting part of the paper was that we're still at the stage of convincing people that photo IDs actually worked and were useful. And we dedicated a paragraph to that. The first sentence was, "We believe this method will provide more information about the distribution, behavior, and population size of humpbacks than traditional tags," and then went on from there. How things have changed.
I would especially like to thank Ginny Jurasz for being part of this week's Chronicles, and to make clear that Chuck Jurasz was a school teacher, but he was more than that. Chuck was a pioneer in whale research and studying whale behavior. Thanks to all of you that have done the work and supported the work that helps these changes happen, that helps us change how we see the world. Bye-bye.